Hello there guys, Daniel Childs back here again for another episode of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you've all had a really good week. We're nearly at the weekend, which means the start of the Euros. I did a long collab with another brilliant Chelsea guest, Nini FC, and within that we gave sort of a preview or our thoughts mainly about England, but some other teams at the Euros, and kind of did a Euros preview. So I'm going to be releasing that tomorrow before the first game, so make sure you're staying tuned for that. There will be a full podcast out, and I will be releasing over the weekend some more clips in terms of what me and Nini spoke about, because some of it relates to what we're speaking about today in regards to Chelsea news, but hopefully you guys will stay tuned for that. But yeah, we've got a little bit to get through today. Some Michael Olise chat that has kind of broken today and feels like that particular interest has been ramped up from a Chelsea perspective. And then also kind of the weird framing and reframing of the Conor Gallagher situation in a more positive light. So I guess in two ways today, we're feeling a little bit more optimistic about Chelsea, but we'll get into that. Please do hit that subscribe button as we produce content over the summer. It's free to do, really helps out the show. And if you're listening on the podcast feed, please do give us a positive rate and review. Really helps the show out on that aspect as well. Let's start off though with Olise. Not a shock that news has come out that Chelsea have made contact over Michael Olise. We were here last summer, a deal that nearly happened, but then he decided to remain. But today, David Ornstein reporting for The Athletic that Chelsea have made contact with Crystal Palace over a deal for Michael Olise. Apparently, they've asked permission on Wednesday afternoon to speak to the winger's representatives with the hope of agreeing personal terms. Then this moved on to Matt Law reporting that Olise does have this 60 million release clause, but it's not straightforward for Chelsea. And that even though there is one there, it is understood that the release clause might not be straightforward and may only be able to be triggered by a Champions League club. Then Ben Jacobs tweeted out that the speed at which clubs are moving on Olise is partly down to the player, who is in France's provisional Olympic squad, hoping to decide in the coming days or weeks on his future. Olise wants to carefully assess all suitors before deciding if which move is right. Likely to be quite a structured process, with all clubs coming forward to Palace, aware of Olise's preference for clarity in June or early July. And Chelsea apparently don't feel at a disadvantage because they don't have Champions League. And to be fair, the only other major club at the moment that's being talked about in competition with Chelsea is Man United, who don't have Champions League football either. So if that is accurate, it's not like they can jump ahead of Chelsea with this in terms of triggering a release clause, and then Chelsea can't because they don't have UCL. So I think there's obviously going to be to-in and fro-in, back and forth, as we always get at this time of the year with transfers, and Chelsea may have to pay a bit more than 60 million. But I do think on its own, this is a serious piece of business if Chelsea can get it over the line. If you've read my stuff, if you've been listening to what I've said, I am not someone who's been screaming that Chelsea need to spend loads of money this summer. That's not been my position. It still isn't my position. But there are some talents where I do think, yeah, you are absolutely upgrading what you have. You are bringing in a talent that you don't have currently and actually will improve the options for Enzo Maresca. And I think Olise falls into that category. It's why Chelsea wanted to sign him last year. I just think he's a super talented player. I think he's a super talented individual that is only going to go up further levels. I think his productivity, despite not playing tons of minutes for Crystal Palace last season, compared to, say, a Cole Palmer, should really excite you what he could do with the potential of playing with the likes of Palmer, how those two players could rotate off the right. I don't think that's a negative. I don't think signing Michael Olise limits your options. I think it expands your options. And I really do feel that it's the type of signing that this ownership needs to be making now with what they've built over the past year. You've bought a load of young, unproven players. You now need to start adding prime players. That's where you do the business this summer, because there's no point signing a load of raw players this summer. We've already done it, and you're just going to clutter the squad further. I think what you need to do to really justify making moves in the market is to look in areas where can you substantially upgrade what you have? Is there an opportunity in the market to grab one of the best wide players in the Premier League? That is absolutely where Michael Olise fits in. And I feel that 60 million, 70 million, actually, you given the fact that we paid 40 million for Cole Palmer, which, I mean, in this current market looks like an absolute steal. I actually think if you were to pay 70 or 80 million for Olise, I don't think it would take long for that piece of business to look fair. And I know, again, we're talking very high numbers. We're talking about Chelsea, who don't spend money very well. But I'm purely looking at the talent here, who's been on a upwards trajectory for some time. So I would love to see this deal get over the line, because I do think it massively upgrades Chelsea. I really do. And I'd have a lot of confidence that for Enzo Maresca, it'd be a very good decision. And it looks like, at the very least, this isn't always the case, but the players' side really wants to get this resolved either way pretty quickly, which, with the Olympics, with the Euros, with a quick turnaround to the Premier League, obviously players want to get their future resolved, which I think hopefully speeds up the process and cuts out a lot of the BS that we get at this time of the year. The other thing that I think is a positive today, before we wrap up, is a slight turning of the news and conjecture and briefing around Conor Gallagher. So the Guardian reporting that Chelsea could offer Gallagher a new contract despite transfer talk. And apparently Chelsea are considering a shift in their position over selling Gallagher and could make a concerted effort to agree a new deal with the midfielder. Gallagher is obviously out of contract at the end of next season and remains a candidate to leave the bridge this summer and is wanted by Aston Villa and Spurs. But while they have been plenty of indications that Chelsea are actively looking to sell Gallagher, who is valued at £50 million, there has been a change in the noise around the situation. It's just been quite comical and quite sad, actually, in the past week or so, looking at some of the reports that specifically talk about how people within the club don't really rate Conor Gallagher, don't feel he is suited to Enzo Maresca's style of play, which is quite convenient given that Enzo Maresca and Conor Gallagher haven't started working together. And also it's quite convenient that the players that apparently don't suit Enzo Maresca's style of play are also, as Chicago Dimitri pointed out, as I've pointed out, as others have as well, are conveniently the ones that Chelsea have been trying to sell for the past year. It's just nonsense. Like, if you want to brief against your own players, at least be a little bit more coy about it. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. But in terms of flipping the other way now, where I feel like what has happened here probably, and I feel like it'd be the same with Trev, is that both players don't want to leave Chelsea. Both players enjoy playing at Chelsea, and both players know they're in a very strong position, especially Conor Gallagher, with the fact he only has 1 year left on his deal. And he'll probably sit there and go, I back myself to remain in the first team. I back myself that Enzo Maresca will quickly look at me as a player that's valuable to his system. And if he has a similar year or better than last year, the pool of clubs available to him next summer, if Chelsea weren't to resolve his future, would be a lot higher. So from a player career point of view, it makes a lot of sense. But also just for him, obviously emotionally wanting to stay at Chelsea, and what then it does to the hierarchy at Chelsea is they cannot afford to lose Conor Gallagher on a free. No one at that club can, claim to be masters at pure profit, masters at getting a lot of money in for players they sell, and allow a player of the talent with his age to leave, like Conor Gallagher, effectively walking into his prime to most likely a Premier League rival. They know from a PR point of view, they know just from a financial point of view, it's an own goal. So what happens then? Do you allow that player to walk out for free, or do you resolve the situation knowing that actually it's going to save you money and it's the smartest decision you could make to keep Conor? And that's my hope, is where the breaking point comes, because logically the best signing, I know we just spoke about Olise, but one of the best signings Chelsea could make this summer is by handing Conor Gallagher a new contract, because it's very difficult to find players like him with his durability, with his consistency, with what he can provide, especially off the ball very quickly, and add balance, help elevate the performances of others. I think that Olise and Gallagher, obviously, I believe played together in the year Gallagher was on loan there. I believe Olise was already at Crystal Palace at that point. So Gallagher helps players like that. I think he helps elevate because of all the selfless running he does, and I think the tactical intelligence of the player too. So My hope is we eventually get to the right choice here and we get to the obvious decision. I'm not going to give the club overwhelming credit if we do end there, because I think it's just quite obvious that you should keep Conor Gallagher. But at the very least, it's nice that I'm not now reading reports that Conor Gallagher is not suited to playing a style of football that he hasn't even played yet, or work under a coach that he hasn't even worked under yet. And how you can make that firm judgment right now is quite comical. And obviously, he is away at the Euros too, and I can imagine that maybe he's feeling a little bit more relaxed than, say, Olise is. But I believe, like a lot of players, would want this to be resolved, and I think that the sight of Conor holding up that shirt, signing that contract, would be delightful. I think it would make a lot of people feel a lot more optimistic about next season. And I think if you're adding top Premier League quality like Olise on top of that, I think the outlook for Chelsea fans and the outlook for next season becomes a lot more positive. I think if you allow Conor Gallagher to leave, if you don't sign players like Olise, I think if you miss out on top targets and you end up signing players who want that quality, it's not going to be the same. So my hope is that Conor gets resolved, Chelsea progress with Olise, and hopefully Joe Shield's influence in that, and also the groundwork they made last year can make a huge difference with Olise. That's my hope. So those are my thoughts today. There is a video coming up. Me and Nini, funny enough, I ask him about Duran, obviously, from Aston Villa. That's another target we've heard reports about. We have a conversation about him because there's a lot to say about him as a potential striker option. So please do stay tuned for that conversation. Like, subscribe, share this video around, follow me across socials at SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.